shadows of yesterday. The autumn rain tapped gently against the window pane as Amara Desai stared at the ceiling of her bedroom. Her bedroom, not theirs. Never theirs, despite the gold band that encircled her finger and matched the one worn by the man sleeping down the hall. 3 months had passed since her parents had proudly announced her marriage to Nathan Rodriguez, the son of their longtime family friends. 3 months of polite conversations over breakfast, careful smiles at community gatherings, and nights spent in separate rooms. "It's just nerves," her mother had whispered on her wedding day, adjusting Amara's crimson sari with practiced hands. "You'll grow to love him. He's a good man, successful, kind. What more could you want?" What more indeed? At 32, Amara had resigned herself to this arrangement. After all, Nathan was everything her mother claimed, a successful architect, with gentle eyes and a reputation for thoughtfulness. But what her family didn't know, what nobody knew, was that beneath Amara's composed exterior lay a heart that had been shattered beyond recognition. She turned to her side, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. 4 years ago, she had loved a man named Rohan, who had slowly, methodically dismantled her self-worth. It began with subtle criticisms, escalated to monitoring her every move, and culminated in a night of terror that left both physical and emotional scars. She had escaped, rebuilt her life piece by piece, and sworn never to be vulnerable again. And then came the arrangement with Nathan. "I understand if you need time," he had said on their wedding night, voice soft in the dim light of their hotel room. "We can be friends first." Amara had nodded, relief washing over her. "Thank you," she'd whispered, the first genuine words she'd spoken that day. Nathan kept his promise. He never pushed, never questioned why she flinched when he moved too quickly, or why she always maintained a careful distance between them. He simply accepted her boundaries with a patience that sometimes made her chest ache with guilt. Their townhouse in Philadelphia became divided territory. The kitchen and living room were shared spaces where they engaged in careful conversation about their days. Her art studio on the second floor was her sanctuary, while his home office was strictly his domain. And their bedrooms remained separate fortresses at opposite ends of the hallway. Outside their home, they played their parts convincingly. At dinner with colleagues, Nathan's hand would hover near hers but never touch. At family gatherings, they stood close enough to appear united, but far enough apart that their shoulders never brushed. To the world, they were simply a modern couple finding their rhythm. Only Amara knew the truth, that every smile masked a memory, every hesitation concealed a scar. "Will you be joining me for dinner tonight?" Nathan asked that morning before leaving for work, his briefcase in hand. "I thought I might cook pasta." "I have a commission to finish," Amara replied, focusing on her coffee. "But I can try to wrap up early." He nodded, disappointment flickering across his face, before being replaced with his usual gentle smile. "No pressure. There'll be plenty if you change your mind." After he left, Amara retreated to her studio, losing herself in the landscapes. She was creating for a local restaurant. Her brush moved across the canvas with practiced strokes, creating mountains and valleys that existed nowhere but in her imagination, places where she could escape when memories threatened to overwhelm her. Hours later, the scent of garlic and tomatoes drifted upstairs. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she'd skipped lunch. Setting down her brush, she glanced at the clock. 8:30. Nathan would be eating alone again, probably reading one of his architecture magazines at the dining table. The guilt returned, heavier this time. He deserved more than this half-life they were living. Maybe she could join him, just for a meal. Maybe tonight she could try. With hesitant steps, Amara descended the stairs, each creak of the wood announcing Her approach to the man who was her husband in name only, a man who, despite her best efforts to keep him at a distance, was slowly becoming impossible to ignore. The space between us, Nathan Rodriguez placed 2 plates on the dining table, a ritual he maintained despite knowing Amara would likely not appear. The pasta steamed, releasing aromatic scents of basil and garlic into the air. He had added extra, mushrooms. He remembered Amara mentioning once that she loved them. These small details he collected carefully, like precious stones he hoped might someday form a complete picture of the woman he had married. When he heard the stairs creak, he looked up in surprise. Amara stood in the doorway, her dark hair pulled into a loose bun, paint smudges on her fingertips. "It smells wonderful," she said, her voice soft. Nathan tried to contain his smile. "I'm glad you could join me." As they ate, Nathan observed the careful way Amara held herself, back straight, movements precise, as if constantly aware of the space her body occupied. During their 3 months of marriage, he had learned to read the subtle signs. How she would take a step back if he came too close, how her eyes would dart to the nearest exit when they entered a room, how she would wrap her arms around herself when conversations turned personal. "How is your commission coming along?" he asked. "Well, I think the client wants something serene but dramatic." Her eyes met his briefly before returning to her plate. "How was your day?" "We won the bid for the community center renovation," Nathan replied, wanting to reach across the table to touch her hand in excitement but restraining himself. "The one I told you about last week." "That's wonderful," Amara said, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Congratulations." The conversation lapsed into silence. Nathan wondered, as he often did, what thoughts moved behind those guarded eyes. Their marriage had been arranged by their families. His mother and her father had been college friends who had remained close despite taking different paths. When Nathan turned 35, still unmarried and focused on building his architecture, firm, his parents had suggested Amara. She was creative, intelligent, from a good family with similar values. What they hadn't mentioned was the profound sadness that seemed to follow her like a shadow. "Would you like to watch something after dinner?" Nathan ventured. "That documentary series you mentioned is available now." Amara hesitated, twirling pasta around her fork. "Perhaps another night. I should finish the piece I'm working on." Nathan nodded, swallowing his disappointment. "Of course. The offer stands whenever you're ready." Later that evening, after Amara had retreated to her studio and then to her bedroom, Nathan sat in the living room with architectural plans spread before him. But his mind kept drifting to his wife. What had happened to make her build such impenetrable walls? Was it something he was doing wrong? Or was it simply that she didn't want this marriage but felt trapped by familial expectations? He remembered their wedding day, how beautiful she had looked in her red and gold sari, how her smile had seemed forced during the ceremony. He had attributed it to nerves, to the pressure of performing the perfect wedding for their families. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, that distance remained. His friends didn't understand. "Just talk to her," his best friend Victor had advised over drinks last week. "Or maybe you should just move on. What kind of marriage is this anyway?" But Nathan couldn't explain the feeling that had settled in his chest from the moment he met Amara, a certainty that beneath her careful composure was someone worth knowing, worth waiting for. He had seen glimpses of it, the passion in her voice when she discussed her art, the kindness she showed to the elderly neighbor who needed help with groceries, the way she sometimes hummed absent-mindedly while cooking. Rising from the couch, Nathan walked to the window that overlooked their small backyard. The autumn rain had stopped, leaving the world damp and glistening under the streetlights. In the reflection of the glass, he could see the framed photo on the mantel, their wedding portrait. They stood side by side, not touching, both smiling. in a way that looked convincing to anyone who didn't look too closely. Nathan sighed, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. Perhaps his parents had been wrong. Perhaps Victor was right. Perhaps this patient waiting was nothing but a fool's errand. Upstairs, he could hear the soft footsteps of Amara moving around her room. So close physically, yet so distant in every other way. He had promised himself and her that he would give her time, that he wouldn't pressure her. But as the days passed, the silence between them grew heavier, more difficult to bear. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would try again. Maybe he would bring home flowers. Not roses, which seemed to make her uncomfortable, but perhaps sunflowers. He had noticed how she paused to admire them at the farmer's market last weekend. Or maybe he would suggest they visit the new exhibition. At the art museum, give her a chance to share her expertise in a neutral setting. These small bridges he attempted to build, plank by careful plank, hoping that someday she might meet him halfway. Until then, he would continue to navigate the space between them, respecting the boundaries she had established, while nurturing the hope that they might someday share more than just a name and an address. With one last look at the night sky, Nathan turned away from the window, gathering his plans. As he climbed the stairs toward his solitary room, he passed Amara's closed door and paused, his hand lifting instinctively before falling back to his side. "Good night, Amara," he whispered to the silent hallway before continuing to his room alone. Midnight Confessions. The clock on Nathan's nightstand read 2:17 a.m. when he was jolted awake by a sound. He lay still, disoriented before identifying it. A cry from down the hall. From Amara's room. Without hesitation, he rose, pulling on a t-shirt as he moved toward her door. Another sound came, a whimper that made his chest tighten. He paused outside her room, uncertain. "Amara?" he called softly, knocking lightly. No response came except for another muffled cry. Concern, overriding hesitation, Nathan carefully opened the door. The moonlight filtering through the curtains revealed Amara tangled in her sheets, her face contorted in distress, though her eyes remained closed. "No," she murmured, her head turning sharply as if avoiding an invisible blow. "Please, not again. Rohan, stop!" Nathan froze at the unfamiliar name, his hand still on the doorknob. This was private, something he wasn't meant to witness. Yet Amara's distress was real, and leaving her trapped in whatever nightmare gripped her seemed cruel. Cautiously, he approached the bed. "Amara," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're dreaming. You're safe." Her eyes flew open, wild with terror. For a moment, she stared through him, still caught in the dream. Then awareness dawned, and with it came shame. She sat up abruptly, pulling the blanket around herself like armor. "Nathan," she gasped. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." "You don't need to apologize," he said, maintaining a careful distance from the bed. "You were having a nightmare." Amara pushed her hair from her face, her breathing still rapid. "It's nothing. Just a bad dream." Nathan hesitated, then took a risk. "You said a name. Rohan." The color drained from her face. "You should go," she whispered. "Amara," Nathan said, his voice soft but resolute. "I've respected your boundaries. I've given you space, but I can't help feeling there's something you're carrying alone. Something that's hurting you." Silence, stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Nathan was about to apologize, to retreat, when Amara spoke. "He was my fiancé," she said, her voice barely audible. Before everything." Nathan remained silent, afraid any movement or word might shatter this moment of openness. "We met at an art exhibition," Amara continued, her gaze fixed on her hands. "He was charming, attentive. I fell quickly, too quickly to notice the warning signs." She drew a deep breath. It started small. Comments about my clothes, suggestions about who I should spend time with. Then he began checking my phone, questioning where I'd been. Her fingers twisted the edge of the blanket. I made excuses. For him. Said he was protective because he loved me. Nathan felt a cold knot form in his stomach, anticipating where this story was heading. By the time I realized how controlling he'd become, I was isolated. He'd methodically separated me from friends, convinced me my family wouldn't understand. Our relationship. Amara's voice trembled. When I finally tried to leave him, he became someone I didn't recognize. She looked up at Nathan, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The night I told him it was over, he became violent. Said if he couldn't have me, no one would. Nathan's hands clenched involuntarily. Amara, I'm so sorry. I escaped with a fractured wrist and bruises that eventually faded. Her voice hardened. The police report I filed resulted in a restraining order, but the damage was done. I couldn't trust anymore. Couldn't bear the thought of being vulnerable again. Understanding flooded Nathan, her flinching at sudden movements, her need for personal space, the separate bedrooms. It wasn't rejection, it was protection. When my parents suggested our arrangement, Amara continued, I agreed because I was tired of their worry, tired of being seen as damaged. They knew nothing about Rohan. I was too ashamed to tell them. I thought I could manage a marriage of convenience, a partnership based on mutual respect rather than love. She looked directly at him now. You deserve to know before our wedding. But I couldn't bring myself to share my failure with a stranger. It wasn't your failure, Nathan said firmly. What he did, that was his failure as a human being. Amara shook her head slightly. I should have seen the signs earlier, should have been stronger. No, Nathan insisted, careful to keep his voice gentle despite his rising anger at what she'd endured. Abusers are skilled manipulators. They isolate, they gaslight, they make you doubt yourself. That's not your fault, Amara. A single tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. In my dreams, I'm still there, still trapped. That's why I keep my distance. The fear. It doesn't simply disappear. Nathan wanted desperately to comfort her, to take her hand or hold her, but he understood now more than ever how important it was to respect her boundaries. What do you need from me? He asked simply. Surprise flickered across her face. What? How can I help you feel safe? What boundaries do you need me to maintain? Amara stared at him, clearly caught off guard by the question. You're not angry? That I kept this from you? How could I be angry about something that was done to you? Nathan's voice was soft but resolute. I'm grateful you trusted me enough to tell me now. Another tear fell, followed by another. I don't deserve your kindness. You deserve that and more, Nathan said. And I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to. For the first time since he'd known her, Amara's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if a fraction of the weight she carried had been lifted. Would you, she began hesitantly, would you sit with me? Just until I fall asleep? Nathan nodded, moving to the armchair in the corner of her room. I'll be right here. As Amara settled back against her pillows, Nathan watched the tension gradually leave her body. Neither spoke again, but the silence between them had transformed, no longer a barrier but a bridge, fragile and new but connecting them nonetheless. In the soft moonlight, Nathan kept his vigil, understanding at last the demons his wife battled each night. And for the first time since their marriage began, he felt not just hope, but certainty that the path forward, however long and winding, was one they could navigate together. Breaking dawn, the morning after Amara's revelation brought a subtle shift in the atmosphere of their home. Nathan awoke in the armchair, his neck stiff, to find Amara already gone from the room. For a moment, he feared she regretted her midnight confession that she might retreat further behind her walls. But when he made his way downstairs, the scent of coffee and toast greeted him, and Amara stood at the kitchen counter, 2 mugs prepared. "I thought you might need this," she said, sliding one toward him. "After spending the night in that uncomfortable chair." "Thank you." Nathan accepted the mug, careful not to brush her fingers. "How are you feeling?" Amara tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Exposed," she admitted, "but also lighter somehow." Over the next weeks, Nathan approached their relationship with renewed understanding. He began a careful choreography, telegraphing his movements before making them, ensuring Amara always had clear paths to exits, never blocking doorways or approaching her from behind. Small adjustments that he hoped would help her feel secure. One evening in early December, he returned home to find Amara in the kitchen, attempting to reach a serving dish from the highest cabinet. "Need some help?" he asked, pausing at a respectful distance. Amara turned, a hint of frustration on her face. "If you wouldn't mind, I'll just—" He gestured toward the cabinet, and she stepped aside, giving him ample space to reach up and retrieve the dish. As he handed it to her, their fingers touched briefly. In the past, she would have pulled away instantly. This time, she didn't flinch. "I'm making vegetable lasagna," she said. "There's enough for 2 if you'd like to join me." "I'd like that very much," Nathan replied, keeping his tone casual despite the leap his heart made. That night, as they ate dinner, Nathan noticed Amara watching him with a thoughtful expression. "What is it?" he asked. She set down her fork. "You've been different since that night, more deliberate in your movements." Nathan considered his response carefully. "I want you to feel safe here, with me." "You've been researching, haven't you?" There was no accusation in her voice, just quiet recognition. He nodded. "I've been reading about trauma, about how to support someone who's experienced what you have." "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." He met her gaze steadily. "Amara, I meant what I said that night. I'm not going anywhere. But I also want you to know that if this arrangement ever becomes too difficult, if you ever decide you need something else—" "Is that what you want?" she interrupted, her voice suddenly tight. "To end this?" "No," he said quickly. "That's not what I want at all. I just need you to know you have choices, that you're not trapped." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Because he took away my choices." "Yes." Amara was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want, Nathan? From this marriage?" The question caught him off guard. "I want—" He paused, choosing his words with care. "I want us to build something real. Something based on trust and mutual respect. I'm not expecting anything you're not ready to give, but I'd like the chance to know you, the real you, and for you to know me." 2 days later, Nathan came home to find Amara waiting in the living room, a folder in her hands. "I have something for you," she said, holding it out to him. "It's not much, but it's a start." Inside the folder was a series of sketches, simple pencil drawings that captured moments from their shared life. Nathan recognized himself reading, at the dining table, watering the plants on the balcony, sleeping in the armchair in her room. Each drawing revealed how closely she had been observing him, even when maintaining her distance. "These are beautiful," he said, genuinely moved. "I thought it was time I shared something of myself with you," Amara explained. "Art it's how I process things, how I make sense of the world." That evening marked another first. They sat together on the couch, a careful foot of space between them, watching the documentary series Nathan had mentioned months ago. When Amara fell asleep halfway through the 2nd episode, her head gradually tilting toward his shoulder, Nathan remained perfectly still, unwilling to disturb this unconscious display of trust. As winter deepened, so did their connection. Nathan, began leaving small notes for Amara, words of encouragement about her latest commission, a newspaper clipping about an art exhibition, a simple "have a good day" with breakfast. Amara, in turn, started joining him for evening walks around the neighborhood, bundled against the cold, their breaths forming clouds in the frosty air. One Sunday morning in January, Nathan was preparing pancakes when Amara appeared in the kitchen. Doorway, her expression hesitant. "I received an invitation," she said, holding up an envelope. "The Philadelphia Art Association is hosting their annual gala next month. My former professor nominated me for their Emerging Artist Showcase." "Amara, that's fantastic," Nathan exclaimed. "Your work deserves to be recognized." She twisted the envelope in her hands. "The thing is, it's a formal event. Couples are expected to attend together." Nathan set down the spatula. "Would you like me to go with you?" "Yes," she said, the word coming out in a rush. "But there's something else. At these events, people expect certain displays of affection between married couples." "We don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with," Nathan assured her. Amara took a deep breath. "That's just it. I want to try, to see if we could practice, maybe? Small things like holding hands or standing close, so I don't panic when we're there." Nathan felt a surge of pride at her courage. "Of course. We can practice. Go as slowly as you need." That afternoon, they sat on the couch, hands resting side by side. Tentatively, Amara extended her pinky finger until it touched his. Nathan remained still, allowing her to set the pace. Gradually, she slid her hand closer until their palms touched. When her fingers intertwined with his, he gave her hand the gentlest of squeezes. "Okay?" he asked softly. Amara nodded, her eyes fixed on their joined hands. "Okay." The days that followed brought more small victories. Amara began sitting closer to Nathan during their evening documentaries. She allowed him to help her into her coat, his hands briefly resting on her shoulders. Once, when he made her laugh with a story about his disastrous attempt at pottery in college, she spontaneously touched his arm, a fleeting contact that left them both momentarily speechless. A week before the gala, as they practiced slow dancing in their living room to prepare, Amara stumbled slightly, and Nathan's arms instinctively tightened to steady her. She stiffened for a moment, and he immediately loosened his hold, but she shook her head. "Don't let go," she whispered. "I'm okay. I just need a moment." Nathan held her gently as she closed her eyes, her breathing deliberate. Slowly, he felt the tension leave her body as she settled against him, her head coming to rest on his shoulder. "Thanks, you," she murmured, "for your patience, for giving me time." "Thank you for trusting me," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. As they swayed to the soft music, Nathan marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. There would be setbacks, he knew. Healing was rarely a straight path. But with each small step, each moment of hard-won trust, the distance between them diminished. Outside their window, the winter sky had cleared, revealing a crescent moon and countless stars. Inside, in the gentle glow of their living room lamps, something new and fragile was taking root, something that, with continued care and patience, might someday bloom into love. The Heart Remembers Spring arrived in Philadelphia, bringing with it cherry blossoms and gentle rains. 6 months had passed since Amara's midnight confession, and the townhouse that had once felt divided now flowed with a different energy. The doors that had remained firmly closed now stood open more often than not. The careful distance once maintained had gradually diminished. The Art Association Gala in February had been a turning point. Amara, resplendent in a midnight blue gown, had greeted colleagues with Nathan's hand firmly in hers. When an older patron had commented on what a handsome couple they made, she hadn't corrected him or stiffened with discomfort. Instead, she'd glanced at Nathan with a small, private smile that made his heart race. "Are you certain you want to do this?" Nathan asked now, standing in the hallway between their bedrooms, a cardboard box in his arms. Amara nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture he had come to recognize as one of her few nervous habits. I've been thinking about it for weeks. It feels right. The box contained Nathan's belongings, clothes, books, the framed photo of his parents that had sat on his nightstand. They were moving them into what had been exclusively Amara's bedroom, transforming it into their shared space. Her suggestion, offered tentatively over breakfast 3 days ago, had caught him by surprise. "We don't have to rush," he'd assured her. "I know," she'd replied. "But I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting him control my life even now." As they arranged Nathan's things in the room, his books on the newly cleared shelves, his clothes in the right side of the closet, Amara paused, holding the blue sweater she had given him for his birthday in March. "I never imagined this," she said softly. "When our parents first suggested the arrangement, I thought the best I could hope for was peaceful coexistence." Nathan set down the frame he was positioning on the dresser. "And now? Now I'm beginning to understand what my mother meant about growing to love someone." She looked up at him, vulnerability and determination mingling in her expression. "I'm not there yet. Not completely. But I'm on my way." Later that evening, as they prepared for bed in their new shared routine, Nathan watched Amara brush her hair at the vanity. The simple domesticity of the moment struck him with unexpected force. "I bought tickets to that jazz festival next weekend," he mentioned. "The one at Fairmount Park." Amara met his eyes in the mirror. "That sounds lovely." As they settled into bed, maintaining the few inches of space that still felt necessary for Amara's comfort, Nathan thought about how far they had come. The nightmares still came occasionally, but now when Amara woke gasping and disoriented, she allowed Nathan to hold her hand, to murmur reassurances, until her breathing steadied. "Nathan?" Amara's voice came softly through the darkness. "Yes?" "I saw him yesterday." Nathan went completely still. "Rohan?" "Yes." Her voice was steady, though he could sense the effort it took. "At the coffee shop near the gallery. He didn't see me. I left before he turned around." Nathan fought to keep his voice calm. "Are you all right?" "That's just it," she said wonderingly. "I am." My heart raced, and for a moment I felt that old panic. But then I thought of you, of us, of everything we've built, and I realized he doesn't have power over me anymore. Nathan reached across the space between them, finding her hand in the darkness. "I'm proud of you, Amara." "I've been thinking," she continued, her fingers tightening around his, "about what healing really means. I always thought it meant forgetting, erasing what happened, but that's not it at all." "What does it mean, then?" Nathan asked softly. "It means remembering without being consumed by it. It means carrying the experience as part of my story, but not letting it dictate my future." She shifted to face him in the darkness. "It means choosing trust, even knowing the risks." The weeks that followed brought a flourishing to their relationship. Amara began accompanying Nathan to his architecture firm's events, her natural eye for design sparking collaborations with his colleagues. Nathan, in turn, became a fixture at her gallery showings, his quiet pride evident as he watched potential clients admire her work. One rainy Sunday in May, they sat together on their balcony, sheltered from the drizzle, sharing sections of the newspaper and a pot of chai. "I received an interesting offer," Amara said, looking up from her reading. "The gallery in Brooklyn. They want to feature my work in their summer showcase." "That's wonderful," Nathan replied. "When would it be?" "July. It would mean spending a few weeks in New York to oversee the installation and attend events." She hesitated. "I'd like you to come with me." Nathan set down his mug. "Of course, I can arrange to work remotely for a while." "Actually," Amara said, her eyes brightening with an excitement he hadn't seen before. I was thinking we could make it a proper trip. The showcase would only require certain days. The rest of the time, we could explore together. Like a honeymoon? Nathan suggested gently. Color rose in Amara's cheeks. Yes, the one we never had. That night, as they prepared for bed, Amara approached Nathan with purpose in her steps. Before he could react, she stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his. Their first real kiss. It was brief, almost chaste, but filled with promise. I've wanted to do that for some time, she admitted, her hands resting lightly on his chest. Nathan's heart thundered beneath her palms. You can do it any time you like. Her smile, unguarded and radiant, took his breath away. 2 weeks later, they celebrated their 1-year wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. Nathan cooked, recreating the pasta dish from the night Amara had first joined him for a meal. As they finished their dessert, a mango kulfi that Amara had prepared from her grandmother's recipe, Nathan presented her with a small package. Inside was a delicate silver locket. When Amara opened it, she found not a photograph, but a miniature painting, a tiny, exquisite rendering of their townhouse. It's beautiful, she breathed. But how? I commissioned it from Priya at your gallery, Nathan explained. I wanted you to have something that represented our beginning. Not the wedding, arranged by our families, but the home where we truly found each other. Tears glistened in Amara's eyes as she fastened the locket around her neck. I have something for you, too. She retrieved a large, flat package from her studio. Inside was a canvas, a portrait of Nathan that captured him not just physically, but essentially. In Amara's skilled hands, she had portrayed him with a gentle strength, a steadfast patience that was so inherently him that it made his throat tighten with emotion. This is how I see you, she said simply. Later that night, as they lay together, in the darkness, closer than they had ever been, Amara whispered, I love you, Nathan. I think perhaps I have for some time, but I was afraid to name it. Nathan drew her closer, his heart full. I love you, too. I think perhaps I have since that first dinner we shared. We've taken a strange path to get here, Amara mused. But it's our path, Nathan replied, and I wouldn't change it. As Amara drifted to sleep in his arms, Nathan reflected on their journey. What had begun as an arrangement, a marriage of convenience, between strangers had transformed into something neither of them could have anticipated. The woman who had once kept herself locked away now slept peacefully beside him, her barriers not demolished but carefully, lovingly dismantled through patience and understanding. Outside their window, the spring rain continued its gentle rhythm, washing the world clean. Inside, in the warmth of their shared bed, two people who had once been strangers now held each other close, their hearts beating in tandem, a different kind of arrangement altogether, one built on choice and trust and love freely given. Amara had been right, Nathan thought as sleep began to claim him. Healing wasn't about forgetting the past, it was about not allowing it to determine the future. It was about recognizing that sometimes the heart remembers not just pain, but also how to love again, perhaps more deeply, more genuinely than before. And in that remembering, that brave choice to trust once more, lay the most profound kind of healing of all.